nothing even resembling a definitive answer.
Well, our weather reports at that time and afterwards show that it was a good clear night. No problems at all with the weather.
Doc Whitburn led the team that investigated the crash of Kilo Tango Echo. Every minute particle of wreckage was inspected, tested. Every theory, no matter how bizarre, was checked.
I've been involved in over 400 accident investigations in Australia alone and New Guinea. And that's probably the one that I'm most unhappy about because we couldn't solve it.
So much we don't know, so little we do. The weather was clear. There was nothing mechanically wrong with Kilo Tango Echo. It should have been a routine flight. That was not to be. The 11 passengers were members of an oil rig crew on their way home for rest and recreation leave. Nothing unusual there. It had happened dozens of times before. But why did the cargo that night include a cardboard carton? A carton containing 3 live parrots. Could they have caused this tragic crash? We'll come back to that later.
Brisbane, Kilo Tango Echo departed Windora at 27, tracking 090 on quantum flight level 270.
That was 9:27 p.m. 8 minutes later, all contact with Kilo Tango Echo was lost. David and Robin McCabe are country folk, trying to make a living in a rugged land. At the time of the crash, they were in the little town of Adavale, underneath the flight path of Kilo Tango Echo.
I heard this noise like thunder, and we knew there couldn't have been any thunder about it because there was no clouds. When I knew which direction it came from, I looked in that direction, which was the southeast, and then I saw the glow like a big bushfire had started.
David McCabe and the local policeman set out across country in a 4-wheel drive to investigate. At that stage, they had no idea what they were looking for, what disaster lay ahead.
We looked about and could see, with the moon coming up, the shine of something in the trees further away from us. And when we approached, we found that it was the fuselage of the plane, which was upside down on the ground. There was one body we could see in through the doorway. Other than that, there was very little other than luggage. We walked around and couldn't hear anything or hear any sign of life or made any identification there was life inside.
This was the scene that confronted the rescuers the next morning. Wreckage scattered through the bush. Confirmation there were no survivors. All 12 men on board dead.
Of course, they were all in a mess, all bodies. There was sort of very little to identify them other than if they had any name tags or in there, or names or cards and that in their wallets and that.
And that was the first problem confronting Doc Whitburn and his investigation team as they sifted through the wreckage. There was so little to go on. They were able to establish that Kilo Tango Echo plunged from 27,000 feet to 7,000 feet. And at that height, it was literally torn apart. But how come the fuselage of the aircraft was largely intact? There the investigators drew a blank. So they moved on to the pilot, Ken Moore. He had obviously lost control of the aircraft. But why?
Did he have a heart attack? Did something else go wrong with him? We don't know. We just do not know.
I don't think any of us know. I really have no idea. You can speculate all you like on it, but I think there's 12 men that know, and I don't think it's just one of those mysteries. I don't think anyone's ever going to find out.
Andrew Moore is the son of Kilo Tango Echo's pilot, Ken Moore. He's had a passion for aeroplanes since childhood, and now runs the family aviation business.
Dad's reputation for safety was second to none. He was to the point of being fanatical on checking of the aircraft, the pre-flight, flight planning, and just the overall operation of the aircraft.
That's one point everyone seems to agree on. Ken Moore was no aerial cowboy. He was cool, calm, and very experienced. The investigating team even prepared medical and psychological profiles. They concluded there was no evidence to suggest that Ken Moore was sick or suicidal. But what of the passengers? It's fair to say they were a high-spirited bunch. Oil riggers who'd been out in the wilds for a long stretch. Tough men in a tough job. And that's where another of the rumours started.
Somebody suggested there might have been fighting going on in the cabin. How the devil can you prove that? I think it's unlikely. Here you have a crew that was tired and going home and pleased to be going home. It's an unlikely scenario to have those guys fighting in an aircraft cabin.
There were other, more sinister suggestions. Drugs was one, explosives another. Enough for Doc Whitburn to call in the narcotics and ballistics experts.
And they went through the luggage and all the belongings of the aircraft with me, with a fine-tooth comb, and there was no evidence whatever found of explosives or of drugs.
As we've said, the weather on that Sunday night was clear, but there had been unusual sunspot activity earlier in the day, and that too triggered a theory from outer space.
A meteorite would expect to puncture the fuselage if it was going to cause damage, and there's no evidence of that at all.
Then comes the mystery of the oxygen masks. Ken Moore was wearing one when he died. That suggests that before the aircraft was ripped apart in mid-air, there'd been a drop in cabin pressure. Was there?
Why he did it on that particular instance, I don't know. But certainly he was wearing an oxygen mask. The other thing we know is that one or two of the passengers were wearing oxygen masks. So perhaps someone in the cabin was not feeling too well. We don't know.
And what of that carton containing the parrots? Not surprisingly, they were the subject of intense conjecture and scrutiny. Popular bush wisdom had it that the parrots had escaped in flight. They started flying around the cabin and somehow caused the crash. Not so, reported one member of the investigation team, who went to inordinate lengths to disprove the theory.
He bred a set of those parrots to see if they could get out of a cardboard box like that of their own volition, and we're pretty sure they couldn't. The second one was what would happen to the parrots at altitude. Will they go mad or go to sleep or what? So, being ex-Air Force, he was able to cooperate with the Air Force and put these parrots, once he'd bred them, into a decompression chamber. And nothing happened. They just sat there, fat and happy, as if the pressure hadn't changed at all. So it sort of ruled that out as a possibility of interfering with the pilot.
No solution. But in this tragedy, there was one very fortunate young man. The pilot's son, Andrew Moore. His life was spared that night. He was saved by his homework.
I was meant to fly on the aircraft, but the rule was if you hadn't done your homework, then you couldn't go. And I hadn't done it, so there was a spare seat, but had to obey the rules that Dad set down.
The aircraft that was perfectly sound. The pilot who had full confidence of the aviation industry. The crash that should never have happened. A mystery that remains unsolved.
I'd love to know if anybody had a theory that's a usable theory as to why the accident occurred. Even now, 12 years afterwards, it would still be pursued. Until you really know why an accident had occurred, the accident is always open. It's never really closed off.